There is a trend I've noticed where people will often assign a role to someone, and regardless of what new information or circumstances may arise to conflict with this perception, they are very inclined to retain it. For example, I have a relative who used to call me lazy for not having a job. After I had one for months and months, they insisted on still calling me this because I didn't want to run their errands. All you want to do is work. And that's when it hit me that this was just a way for them to negatively refer to me, as opposed to a substantive critique that could be addressed and lead to them dropping this dismissive claim. If you don't do what I want, you are lazy. Now, many of my detractors have seen fit to call me an I word and try to mock me over some supposed inability to get with a woman. This has not been the case, at least in recent times. Around the time I did my Discord women video some months back, I had two notable encounters. One was with a woman who lived in the EU that, after engaging in several hours long calls with me, announced that she liked me in a romantic way, and I turned her down for several reasons. The most prominent being that she did not want to have kids and that she lived so damn far away. The other woman I spoke to around this time had a good dialogue with me in typing before unfriending me out of the blue. When I inquired about this, she said she had a boyfriend, and to paraphrase her, that if she heard my voice more, she would want more. We had 2 hour long calls where she made several passes towards me, including asking me to moan for her. So even if I never directly asked her if she wanted the same long term things as me, what she offered in the short term, attempting to start some weird international affair love triangle, was just not something I was interested in doing. After I didn't respond to her for a few days, she blocked me. The reason I turned down their advances ties into why I think long distance relationships are dumb. We all have some idea of an ideal romance, but I think many of the overarching themes are someone that you can be physically intimate with or even just hang out with. When you choose to date someone that lives so far away, you remove every physical component of a romance away from the equation, and it reduces the relationship to just two people who say things. Now, this circumstance can be overridden by a commitment by both sides to remain loyal to each other and to map out a plan to eventually live together, or at least live much closer to each other than presently. But if you don't meet someone who wants to change their living circumstances for you, and vice versa, then you have met an indefinite stalemate. Going back to these two women, the EU woman, after confessing her romantic feelings for me, admitted that she did not want to have kids. This is already us reaching an indefinite stalemate because there is no circumstance where I would ever be satisfied having a supposed romantic partner who I cannot touch and who is antagonistic to my long term desires. In the case of the other one, I think infidelity is bad and would not want to participate in such an enterprise. Add to that someone who lives so far away that the most we could do is just talk dirty, and I really don't have any incentive to express the same feelings towards her. Now, I started the video off with the example of being called lazy in spite of working and noting that this was the word most used to describe me negatively when I didn't have a job, and it still was used by this person when I didn't do what they wanted me to, rendering the word meaningless. So again, guys online mock me for not having a, in quotations, girlfriend, but I have turned down multiple instances where I could have had one. The reason I do that is because I don't see the point of having a girlfriend if that girlfriend does not perform the actions that could be expected of a romantic partner. Like, you can't touch this person, you can't go on a date with them. All you do is talk, but they're your girlfriend. Words at this point mean nothing. The guy that works is lazy. The guy that can get a girlfriend but doesn't want one because there's no point is an I word. Another part of my dissatisfaction is that long distance relationships, at least for me, are not financially viable. When I meet a person in real life who lives in the same city or even in the same state as me, at least I can drive to them and we can do something together, like go see a movie or even just meet up in general. When you're talking about a person who lives on the other side of the country or the world, your only way of going to see them, be it by boat or plane, could cost hundreds or thousands of dollars. And this is not even counting the possibility of trying to meet one of them, also interfering with your work schedule or just other commitments that you may have each week. Now, this is something that can be mitigated if the other partner is willing to foot the bill, or at least a portion of it, to get you to them. However, since we live in the triangle scam era, where many women believe they are gods simply for their gender, and think a man should have to do everything and anything to date one of them, this belief can stretch out to the point of absurdity. For example, the EU woman admits to having wealthy parents who pay for everything she does, but it never occurs to her to use some of that wealth to assist the man she claims to like romantically to come see her. And she was well aware of the financial hardships I have been under for the past year, so it just comes down to her not being serious. I have a coworker, not mixed signals queen, but a guy who I had a conversation about romance with back in January. When we were talking, I mentioned that one of the reasons I don't really waste my time talking to women anymore is the lack of compatibility of my long-term desires with theirs. His response was interesting. To quote him, he said that I was the only expletive he knew who talked about wanting to have a family in the initial stages. His clarification is that the initial stages are the period where a couple is dating, which I thought was funny, but I guess I could see where someone could criticize my stance as being too direct too soon. It is a position where the circumstances should be considered. Let me clarify this. If I met a woman who lived in the same city as me that wanted to do something together, like go see a movie or go to the mall, I would be much more open to it because it's within driving distance and would be nowhere near as taxing on me as some international trip. But if you're talking about going to see a woman who lives in another country, spending days or weeks there, spending hundreds or thousands of dollars just to get there, I don't see where it is to the benefit of the man to make such a large financial expenditure for a woman who is possibly against his long-term goals. And that's the biggest difference. With almost all local women, my long-term desires almost never come up because I'm not seeking to do anything with them except possibly hang out or some other short-term thing. But my mind is more drawn to long-term goals when dealing with these long-distance women because they are going to take a larger amount of time and money to invest in. And there's no point to me doing either of those things if they are against my dreams. Desiring something or someone and having every possible incentive to want it or them removed makes the acquisition virtually meaningless. Imagine if you dreamed of having a car that you could drive to any city or just use to travel around in. Then when you finally appear to be getting a car, it can only go 10 miles from where you live, meaning that you can never leave the city that you're in. This would significantly diminish the desirability of the car were that the thing you most wanted from it. Here's another example. If I call myself being lonely and wanting to have friends, I can define it as people I speak regularly with, get to do things with, etc. But if the friends that I have are people I barely talk to, are never around, or I always have to reach out to even get them to remember I exist, then the desirability of those friends is diminished. If I want a job so that I can take care of myself and maybe at times treat myself to certain material possessions, but then I finally get a job and I still can't take care of myself due to lack of hours or low pay or a mixture of both, the desirability of that job is hampered. And while someone can say the phrase, something is better than nothing, it does not change your perspective that you still have barely anything even in having something. It's just not enough. These women are not enough. One of the last women I ever asked out was in the US, but she lived in the state on the other side of the country. In expressing my desire to live with her, I told her that I could help her pay her rent, which she admitted was giving her difficulty. She had in the past told me that she did not want to have children, even remarking that she would rather be shot. And looking back, I realized my own desperation and how doomed it all was. I was so desperate to have a partner, to be with someone that I was willing to uproot my life for them, and even for the duration of the romance, give up the thing I wanted most of all. It was always going to be doomed because the only thing I would get from this is living with some woman who would financially benefit from me being there. And that would pretty much be it. And maybe for a few months or a year, I'd enjoy being with her due to the physical intimacy. But eventually, I would think about how unfair it was for me that I would have to give up the thing I wanted most of all, having a family, to be with her. And it would, again, not be enough. Going back to my detractors and the things they write about me, there is a refusal on their part to acknowledge nuance. The I word is supposed to mean a man who is involuntarily celibate that is part of subcultures such as forums and other discussion boards. These internet trolls have tried to change the definition to either mean any man that criticizes women or criticizes his inability to become romantically involved with one of them. I don't understand how I can be considered a word that is supposed to mean men who can't get with a woman when I have shown proof that there are some who say they like me, but I'm just not interested. Really, what this comes down to is that when I first started making this kind of content back in 2015, I was just way more desperate to be with a woman than I am now. I would try to initiate romantic things with women I would meet online. But over the following years, as I watched people I know personally, and even some I've just observed on these different sites get married and have children, I just kept thinking about how I was willing to go to all of these extremes just to go on a date. And if that date did not go well, or that woman was unreceptive to doing any of the long term things I'd like to do, then I'd have to start all over with some other lady that lives in another faraway place. And I guess hope that she would be different and worth however much money it took to go see her. All of this led me to just be more cynical and disillusioned and conclude that they're not worth my time. But I notice my detractors don't make fun of me for not wanting to date a woman who lives a million miles away. Again, like the person who still calls me lazy, they associate a term with you and continue to use it even if the person or circumstances change. At least if they said I was involuntarily childless or involuntarily unmarried, that would be accurate. We all know that most of these guys are just dumb kids hiding their faces, pretending to be romance experts when the only woman they've probably ever been with is the one that makes the Playboy cover every month. Weird men and their fake success. Now we have to get over to the what could have been aspect of long distance relationships. If I met a woman who wanted to get married, wanted to have children, and wanted to be with me but lived in another country, I could maybe be convinced to, for a period, entertain the idea of a romance with her. It is beyond frustrating to keep meeting these women who say they don't want to have kids while seeing women both in my neighborhood, at my job, and in my own family having kids all the time. I know these things can happen. They just do not want them to. And in response, I do not want them. It is truly a blessing when you have two partners that agree to a long term goal, compromise, and work together to achieve it. That's what relationships are supposed to be. I have not dated a woman in 8 years, and I have not asked out a woman in over 3 years. There is no point in me trying to have a romantic relationship with one of them if I cannot get the things I want out of it, whether it be something short term like hanging out or physical intimacy, or something long term like getting married or having children. It is entirely possible for me to get a girlfriend, but virtually impossible to meet a woman who I am romantically interested in and is receptive to the things I'd like to do. And to my detractors, if they wanted to mock me over wanting to have a family but never being able to find a woman who wants to do that, at least their ridicule would be over something accurate. Ha 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 ha. You can't find a woman who doesn't live thousands of miles away and actually wants to have kids. The one solace I take from this is that it reinforces that I have standards. Maybe if this was me from 5 years ago or 8 years ago when I would have done anything to just not be alone, I could have been tempted to date someone who lives in another country, but that consideration is now dead, that lane now closed. Long distance relationships, trying to date someone that lives so far away, hoping that one day they'll be closer to you. In the end, it is nothing.